Hi, I'm Dr. Felice Gersh, and I'm happy to join you here for today's show. I'm going to talk about the health of the vagina and the symptom, which is unfortunately so common among women, which is vaginal itching. So just a tiny bit of background on what is the vagina, and what makes it healthy and what makes it unhealthy, and then the symptom of itching will be addressed. First of all, what is the tissue inside of the vagina? Well, the vagina, as you know, is a unique female organ, and it is lined by a type of skin. So it's modified skin, and that type of tissue is called squamous tissue, squamous cells. Now, if you compare the skin on the outside with inside of the vagina, what are some of the differences? Well, there are no hair follicles in the vagina, and there are no sebaceous cysts, no sebaceous glands, so you don't have any of that in the vagina. It's just pure squamous tissue. It also doesn't have the same keratinization. It doesn't have the keratin that sits on top of the skin that makes it kind of like thickened. One thing that's very interesting that most people don't know about the vagina is that it has, as I mentioned, it doesn't have any sebaceous glands. It doesn't have any glands at all. And how does it get moist inside? Well, there's only two ways naturally for the inside of the vagina to be moist, and that is through a process called transudation. That means that fluid actually passes through the walls into the lumen, the inside of the vaginal canal. So what is that fluid made out of? Well, it's coming from inside of blood vessels that actually leak out and then pass through into the lumen, and we call that transudation. It's not actively secreted. It's a passage of fluid. The other portion of lubrication comes from the cervical mucus, and that's it. That's how the vagina stays moist. Now, if the vagina gets very dry, and that can happen under a number of circumstances, the most common being menopause, when you lose your estrogen. So that's very key to maintaining vaginal health, is having proper hormones. You know I talk about hormones all the time. Well, hormones are essential, particularly estrogen in the form of estradiol, that's the form that's made by the ovaries, to maintain vaginal health and vaginal lubrication and the proper microbiome of the vagina. Every system, every organ in the body has its own microbial population, including the vaginal canal. And it's a very complex sort of an ecosystem. In fact, the lower portion has aerobic bacteria, the kind that love oxygen, and the upper portion are anaerobic. They don't like oxygen at all. And the most dominant species is the lactobacillus, and there's a variety of types, and it's so complex you need the exact balance of all these various microbes, the aerobic, the anaerobic, the lactobacilli, and others, to make a healthy vagina. And to support the health of these microbes, of which there are so many, they need to be fed. So how on earth would a microbe get fed in the vagina? Well, the lining cells actually make a food for them called glycogen. This glycogen can actually be fermented, and then in that process of fermentation, they create acid, lactic acid, which acidifies the vagina. So that's another really important thing for vaginal health. It needs to have an acid pH. It should not be alkaline. That would be very harmful for the lactobacilli to survive in. So you need food, and that comes from the lining cells of the squamous lining, and that requires adequate estrogen for those lining cells to be healthy to make the glycogen. You need to have the transudation of the fluid to make the inside moist, and that requires, once again, healthy lining cells, which requires adequate amounts of estrogen. Then you need to have a healthy microbiome, a balanced microbiome. That requires, as I mentioned, adequate food for them and healthy lining cells to make them the food, and the proper pH for them to live in. Now, what happens when you put chemicals in the vagina? Well, like, say, some kind of lubricant or a douche, which we don't want you to use. Or sometimes it could be some form of therapeutic tool, like an antibiotic. Well, anything that you put in that's going to alkalinize the vagina is going to create a hostile environment for your lactobacilli. What happens if they are not healthy and happy? Well, you're going to get overgrowth of some other organism. And one of those can be yeast. So if you have, for example, not enough estrogen, like in an environment that would be in a menopausal vagina, that can cause overgrowth of yeast. Now, it can also cause just dryness and irritation. Either one of those two can cause itching, dryness, or yeast. Now, also, you can have a direct irritant that can come into the vagina that can also cause discomfort and itching. Like if you use some kind of a lubricant that you have a hostile reaction to, if you use any sort of perfumed product, some kind of a bubble bath that's fragrance containing, or some kind of a soap that also may have some chemicals or fragrance. Now, fragrance is often not natural. It can be natural. It could be from an essential oil, but it could also be from chemicals that are called phthalates. But even essential oils that are natural, for some people, they can prove to be irritating. So if you have itching, make sure you think, what kind of soap are you using? Are you using any kind of lotion? Are you using any form of bubble bath? Just get rid of them. Get something else that's all natural, unscented, even if it's a natural scent, just no fragrance of any kind. Now, what else can cause itching? Well, I mentioned so far, recap, dryness from lack of estrogen, as with menopausal women, some sort of chemical irritant that goes into the vagina or around the opening. I should mention sometimes things like toilet paper or detergents on your underwear, or the actual underwear itself may be made of a synthetic product that also can be directly irritating. Also, if you're wearing occlusive kinds of panties, like they don't allow any breathing of the tissues and no evaporation of moisture, that can also cause heat and moisture to be maintained in the area and can also cause an overgrowth of yeast, and yeast can cause itching. What else can cause overgrowth of yeast? Well, antibiotics. So if you've been on a course of antibiotics for any reason, that can kill off the good microbes and then lead to an overgrowth of yeast. And also, if you have diabetes or just glucose regulation problems and insulin resistance, if you have too much sugar, the sugar can actually be secreted along with the fluids that are coming from the blood vessels if you have too much sugar in your bloodstream. And that sugar will feed the yeast. That's why it's so important not to have too much moisture, too much heat. You want to wear natural fibers that can breathe and cause evaporation of fluid. You want to avoid chemicals, toxins, irritants, and of course, you don't want to have prediabetes or diabetes so that you're not going to grow extra yeast because you have extra sugar coming into the vaginal canal. That is terrible. What else can increase vaginal itching? Well, you can also be on hormonal contraception, and it can be in the form of an IUD that has some kind of either copper or the progestin levonorgestrel, like the brand name Mirena. Those kinds of IUDs can cause alteration of the microbial population because you're changing the environment. The copper IUDs create an inflammatory state that can change the vaginal microbiome and can increase growth of a variety of bad overgrowth of microbes, including yeast. In addition, you can have from the Mirena IUD alterations in the hormone and suppression of some of the estrogen, and that too can end up leading to more yeast. So you can see it's a whole variety of things that can lead to overgrowth of yeast and irritants directly from chemicals or toxins that you're using. So get underwear that can breathe, soft natural fibers, avoid chemicals, use only unscented, very gentle natural soaps, avoid bubble baths and other fragrances in the area. Make sure you have a healthy diet, don't develop prediabetes or diabetes, and think about what you're using for contraception and the effects it can have on a variety of organ systems, including the vagina. And when you get into the menopausal years, also think about hormone therapy. Okay? Well, that's a good beginning on the vagina. We're going to talk more about it. It's not studied enough, but it's so vital to female health and, of course, quality of life. I'll see you soon. Take care.